NSW. People who used to develop disposable camera film. What's the creepiest, craziest, most memorable photos you ever developed? Worked at the National Drugstore photo place about 10 years back. Seen it all. The best one by far was Grandma and her grandson's first camera. I'm guessing he was between 5-8 years old. I believe it was disposable. And for sure it also had the ability to do panoramic shots. This little man took all kinds of pictures. I was really impressed. We're talking toys, dinner, inside, outside. He is gonna be a photographer, no doubt. He even set up a bunch of the army figurines on the couch and table in a war, and took pictures of the battle in action. Really cool stuff. Imagine my surprise when I get to one of the panoramic shots. A giant turd in the toilet. Like for real. Nice long one too. The kind that wouldn't go down without breaking in half. Best part, the panoramic shot won't even fit in the envelope. So now I'm holding this 5x7 envelope with a panoramic shot of half a turd sticking out of it in the claims bin. I figure best thing to do is put the turd picture in the back and reverse the pictures so the backs are facing front. An hour or so later, of course, GMA returns with her little boy. At the counter I give her the pack and, as they are paying, of course they open the pack to look. She's looking and being a supportive grandma. Oh so nice. Oh, I like this one, you took it, and the kid is so happy. Finally she gets to the panoramic turd. At this point I can barely contain myself. She looks and goes, oh, whoa, that's you. Her little man looks up with the proudest eyes I ever seen a grandson have ever, and says, I made that. Yes you did, little man. And it was a good one too, is what I should have said. Instead I probably said something like, that'll be 9.95. Do you have your membership card today? I seen a lot of crap at that job. Nasty pics, funny pics, steamy pics, and a bazillion pics of the same old boring waterfall down the street from my job. But only once in my life have I ever seen a panoramic turd, and I will never forget it. TLDR. An 8-year-old took a picture of a turd in panoramic mode, and grandma opened it in front of me. I'm glad I scrolled down far enough to read about the panoramic turd. When I was in the Navy I had a disposable camera. Now submariners are crazy, so I left the camera in the sonar shack. Well, when we pulled into port I sent the camera off to my wife to develop. She told me that they wouldn't develop all the pictures. My shipmates had taken a bunch of pictures of their dongs. Never leave anything unattended and within reach of a board submarine. Back in the early 90s our grocery store developed film. One pic made no sense in the negative, but when printed produced a point of view shot of a guy fricking a handbag. You could see all the miscellaneous purse contents around the dong. TBH, handbags are hot AF. Working on a cruise ship, developing crew films. Some guy would get film sent from his wife. We would develop a few raunchy shots of the missus in various stages of undress. We assumed tripod and self-timer were involved, but no. In one set of shots there was a mirror in the background. Their son, maybe around 10-12, was taking the photos. Did not expect that. Used to develop film from a prison. They'd give the inmates disposable cameras for some reason. I think they were instructed to take pictures of their friends so the inmates would reveal who's in what gang. IDK. Anywho, between pictures of dudes making gang signs and posing in groups there would be pictures of finger paintings, which I thought was kind of sweet. In low-level security, a lot of inmates are normal people that just messed up hard and are paying the price. I'd like to think the cameras gave light to their dull situation and brought some fun with something creative, or at least something other than finger paints. I worked at a retail store that you could pick up your packs of photos from a large bin. Occasionally there would be a torn pack and a couple photos would fall out between the inventory truck and the customer pickup bin. One such time, it was the photo index card that I found on the ground. Picked it up and looked at it. Showed a sequence of pictures. Some grandma's birthday party. Kids playing. Presumably, mom naked. The mom and dude fricking. Random family gathering and portraits. And then a Thanksgiving. I read this all as being in one photo and got worried. I worked on a photo desk in a supermarket for 3 years. The craziest one I ever had was when a guy asked to print off his wedding pictures from his phone. Didn't realize he'd selected everything on there to be printed, and ended up with a bunch of printouts of him getting it on with another guy just before the wedding. Forgot to mention he married a woman. I made some poor soul develop pics of me posed as Rose from the Titanic. Fully nude, jewelry and all. I'm a dude. Not memorable for the photos, but for the whole situation. A guy comes in saying he wants to pick up his photos. So as usual we take his name and go to the drawer to look for them. Nothing there by that name, I say. Perhaps another name? No, he says. So I asked when he brought the film in to be developed. It was a disposable camera, says the guy. I say, okay, so when did you bring in the camera to be developed? It was a disposable camera, he says. After a bit of toing and froing, turns out he took the term disposable camera literally, so threw it in the bin right after using it. When I asked him how he expected the photos to get to us from the bin, he said I dunno, satellites or something. Frick me, this was 1999. Like a £5 cardboard camera is gonna have satellite communication FFS. So my aunt has a picture of her and her kids in front of their farmhouse. Unfortunately, she accidentally superimposed the picture of her mother-in-law in her funeral casket, so she was hovering in the sky above her grandchildren. My cousin called it grandma levitating, and my aunt had it in her house for years. Unfortunately, I cannot post the pictures because it's at my aunt's house several hours away, and they haven't talked to me since they found out I voted for Hillary. We've got a similarly double exposed shot of my very elderly and proper great aunt hovering over a McDonald's. Always makes us laugh when we see it in the photo album. Alright, I had a summer job developing photos, among other tasks, at a major American pharmacy retail chain about 10 years ago. The photo development process itself was fairly uncomplicated, as a machine automated most of the work. I would load the 35mm roll into the compartment, seal it in, select a few settings, and the pictures would pop out in a few minutes. The store wasn't usually very busy, so sometimes I'd look through people's photos. There were the usual assortment of family trips, bar mitzvahs, graduations, awkward proto selfies, photo frick-ups of people's feet and blurred walls. But every couple of weeks, I'd load in an inconspicuous roll of film, and out would pop the gore. Corpses, a torso opened up, a stainless steel tray holding some organs, a crushed skull, orange-pink brain clearly visible. It got to be pretty disturbing. I would just finish putting photos of a kid's birthday party into an envelope for the customer to pick up, go to the machine to pick up the next batch, and see multiple puncture and slash wounds on a hairy chest, or the bloated, opened abdominal cavity of an obese woman. A couple of the other staff would always demand to know when the sick pics would turn up, so they could have a look, too. We speculated, for fun, that there was a serial killer in town, and that he was brazenly taunting us with his work. Of course, we had the customer's last name, first initial, and phone number on the packet we'd keep the photos in, ready for them to come and pick it up. He came in one day to pick up his shots while I was working the photo area. When he told me his last name, he must have noticed that I paused a little longer than normal before retrieving his photos, and he gave me a wry little smile. "You've seen my work?" he asked me. I stammered out some kind of affirmative response. His little smile grew a little more. "Don't get any weird ideas, kid. I'm the county coroner." "Don't get any weird ideas, kid. I'm the county coroner," is exactly what a serial killer would say. I develop film right now. We got my favorite thing recently. So when you look through a roll, you get some idea of a story. We got one roll recently. Vacation, shots of the various landmarks, and so on. Then guy snorting C in his hotel room. Then 3 shots later, it's him in his underwear, in that same hotel room, holding a goat's head. The flash was on too, so the goat's eyes are glowing. No context. Nothing. I love it. I think the C was context. I worked at a camera store in my high schools and college days, and we had a photo lab in the back. It was a college town, and so there were plenty of photos of young adults exploring their orientation, etc. I never saw anything that I considered inappropriate, child pee or anything like that. We did have a cardboard cover for the machine output hopper so that people wouldn't see any photos of nudity and get upset. However, the most memorable images I remember printing were from 1989. From the Tiananmen Square ads. You know, the man holding up the line of tanks, the tank man, and the 200 plus people who were killed. It was a big deal in world at that time, and especially in college towns for a few reasons. First, the protesters were mostly college-aged Chinese. Second, there were a lot of Chinese grad students on campuses in the US, and they felt deeply impacted by this. Many new people protesting in China. We had students coming into the store with photos they took off the TV screen so they could reproduce them in the hundreds to send back to China to circumvent the regime's oppressive control of the media. I'll never forget those events, and the students' desire to do their part, even though they were one stroke to the world away. We gave them massive discounts on the orders, too. I knew a 24-year-old Chinese man who had never heard of anything happening in Tiananmen Square until recently. I referenced the picture of Tankman and he had no idea what I was talking about. Never worked with physical film other than to box it up to ship to Fujifilm, but a good part of my job right now is printing people's photo orders. Most of it is pretty boring and typical, occasional steamy selfies or the guy with a BBW fetish. And then there was the time a few weeks ago I printed a picture of a guy laying in the middle of the street, head blown off and brains strewn everywhere. The kicker to me was that it was mixed in with other innocent pictures of kids and scenery, and then, suddenly, brains. My dad gets crime scene pictures for work that he sends to Walmart for the 1-hour photo development. I don't know if they are ever that graphic, but he told me once about sending domestic violence pictures online and being offered to post a picture of bruises on a coffee mug. It also offered mouse pads and calendars and other stuff, all with the pictures on them. I worked at a mini lab and have seen graphic photos, from car accidents to all kinds of freaking acts. It was challenging when customers would ask for a dose of nasty pics to color correct for better skin tones. My favorite role was from a piano company. My co-worker pointed out that there were no pianos in the photos, but there sure was a lot of flute playing. I worked when they had a bright idea to introduce disposable camcorders. Lots of people made homemade P videos, almost all of which I did not want to see naked. One was pictures of bruises all over a child, called a manager who called the cops. Turned out the father was beating the kids and the wife was trying to document but didn't want to turn the dad in. That wasn't fun. Whole bunch of drugs and guns and pictures, intermixed with family photos. Dude worked for Homeland Security and forgot what he had on the camera. Developed a couple's wedding photos. They put out a bunch of disposable cameras for the guests, multiple dong pics. Then I ran their honeymoon pictures and lots of her naked. A+. They came in to pick up and were talking about the resort and said they let peacocks just roam around. Without thinking I said oh yes, or that looked kind of neat. That's when they realized that I looked at their pictures. You have to click the button on the machine for each picture. Kind of got quiet after that. Remembered another one. Can't believe I forgot Creepy Guy. Creepy Guy would ride his bike to the store about 2 hours before close and spend the entire time on the Kodak machine. He would smile and laugh to himself and end up only printing 5 pictures over that time. Dude was late 40ish and hit on the 16-year-old girls, so they'd switch with me if I was stocking rather than stand with him. Anywho, he knew the code to the machine and would delete what he was doing when he was done, along with immediately putting the pictures in the bag when they printed. My curiosity got the best of me, so I changed the code. He came in, did his thing and then tried to delete his pictures. Flipped his crap when he couldn't delete, yelled, screamed, etc. Finally left the store. He was taking pictures of his neighbors through his blinds and then adding bubble captions. I can't recall the details, but it was creepy. Never saw him again after that. Along the same lines, I worked for a company that had a photo printing site that did photo books and gifts. Some of the more memorable photos I recall going through the system. A topless elderly woman with her naked boobs resting on the keys of a piano. The infamous poop book. A client must have had some sort of fecal fetish, as he created a photo book comprised of various images of his poop. The book culminated in a toilet selfie. It looked like the camera was placed inside the toilet bowl, as you could see the rim of the seat and everything, and the guy was standing over the toilet. He ordered about 10 copies. 2, assumedly for his other fecal fetish friends. I failed to mention that he was standing over the bowl completely nude, and you could definitely see his junk. Guess that was an important detail. Old boobs on a piano. Well, that's one way to play B flat. Besides the child P, borderline child P, and nudists, it would have to be the roll of film that ended with a woman being fricked by a dog. Oh, and the dude who decided to take a picture of his dong in a hot dog bun. No, that is not an innuendo. He did not fill the bun out. The fact that the bun was too big really is the worst part of all this. When I was about 16-17 I worked for CVS as a photo tech. I once had a roll that was a series of trophy pictures of naked women laying all in the same bed. Some of them happened to be under 18 as I went to high school with them. I told my manager she needed to take a look at this and she said when the guy came in that she wanted to talk to him. I called him, told him his rolls were all set, and when he came in she had cops waiting for him. Crap was crazy. Glad that your manager got to do the right thing. I used to be a tech in a 1-hour photo lab. Back when we still processed the film in the store. Some years back I had a customer bring in a couple of rolls of film and make me promise to delete them from our machine's archives when they were done. The images were from September 11, 2001. This guy was there and took pictures of the towers as they burned, but waited nearly a decade to get them developed. So I was the first and likely one of the few people who will ever see those particular photos of that day. True to my word, I never shared them with anyone. Yes, we do share crazy pictures with our co-workers, but I still remember them. Makes you wonder how many photos like that exist in the world. Unfortunately, he'd waited too long to develop them. So some of the pictures were lost, as negatives are sensitive and can easily be damaged over time due to X-ray, heat, moisture, or light exposure. Aside from that, I didn't get too many atypical things. A few times a year I'd get to use a poster board to cover the prints coming out cause of dongs or boobs. Our machine was in an area where customers could walk by and see them printing out. Also the occasional accident photos, including some I had to take myself in the parking lot. Nothing exciting, just spots where customers fell. Oh, there was that one super sleazy guy who used to come in and print photos on the instant kiosks. Most of the pictures he printed were girls of questionable legality, posing but not nude. He claimed to be a photographer, but he was gross and gave off a really creepy vibe. I showed my manager a few of the pictures he happened to leave behind one day and got him banned from our photo lab. But there was nothing else we could do about it. By and large though, most photos weren't all that memorable. 99% of people suck at taking pictures. My least favorites were those disposable cameras people would leave on the tables at wedding receptions. Guaranteed I'd spend an entire night developing 30 rolls of absolute crap pictures. So boring. Those and underwater disposables. Total waste of money, but at least they were fun to pop open. I used to see how far I could get the little plastic shutter to launch across the lab. I used to love smashing open underwater cameras. A flat screwdriver and a hammer was awesome. I work at a store, no details, that has a photo development section. A lady came asking for her photos and I couldn't find them anywhere. So I check in the system and see her name, so I decide to reprint them. In order to print them I need to open a page on the computer that showed all of her pictures, and when I looked it was all naked pictures. This lady was getting naked pictures of herself printed out at a store where some employee will have to see them. After I printed them out, she smiled and winked and walked away. Incredibly awkward. Now you know part of her exhibitionist fetish. I worked at a photolab for 3 years back in the 90s, and I have some pretty good ones. Most of the photos that people tried to take that were NSW were terrible. They would usually buy one of the crappy disposable cameras, without a flash, and take the pictures in a poorly lit bedroom where the pictures would come out terribly. I did have one high school friend privately ask me to develop photos of her for her boyfriend. They were very tame, but it was weird seeing her with stuffed animals strategically placed over her body. As you can imagine, whenever there were risque pictures, we all wanted to see, so it was a bit of a sideshow when they came in. It wasn't often, but it did happen. There were even a couple of times where we had to decide not to print them based on what we saw in the negatives. Nothing creepy, but usually too obscene and explicit to develop in our lab. The conversation with the customer was always a bit awkward, but if they had the courage to drop the pictures off, they were usually prepared to get that information in private. My best story was from about 1996 or so, if I recall correctly. I worked at a photo lab in Fort Worth, TX. very close to the TCU campus and near the Colonial Golf Course. One day in the spring, a guy came in with about 50 rolls of film and wanted them developed immediately. He wasn't rude, but he was in a huge hurry. We weren't cheap, but he didn't care. Turns out there was a dude named Tiger Woods playing the Colonial Golf Tournament, and every single picture, 36 exposure rolls, was of Tiger. He was getting them developed so he could rush back and sell them. We got the film developed as quickly as possible and back to him, and he was gone. I sincerely regret not making a few extra copies for myself, which would have been against the rules, but I should have done it. The creepiest thing was finding out that the guy who worked with me was printing doubles of anything that was out of the norm, and had them all in photo albums in his apartment. I was shocked to see that he had about 40 photo albums full of our customers' photos in his own private collection. Creeped me out a little, especially since lots of the photos were of the NSW variety. Back in the 80s I worked in a sketchy independent 1-hour photo shop hidden in the back of a small mall. It was a magnet for people to bring in their private photos. So much fur. I don't remember a single day when we didn't get in a roll of film with genitalia. We were under orders from the boss and manager to immediately make doubles or triples of the good stuff, and there was a lot of that. We had an entire cupboard filled with photo albums of furry people, yay 80s, doing fun stuff. After a while you got used to seeing homemade frick acts and nudity, so for the most part it was pretty ordinary. The only times it got odd was when the manager would bring in his own rolls for processing. It was a bit jarring the first few times I printed up pictures of him and his girlfriend, who also worked there, being very kinky in front of the camera. Fur and leather. Needless to say I probably shouldn't have been too surprised when their Christmas party turned into a swingers orgy and I found myself in a pile of 12 naked carolers. Pay there was crap but the benefits were top notch. I used to work in a Target photo lab. There were a lot of people with disposable cameras from parties where people appeared in various forms of undress. Once, a hunter brought in pictures of a hunting trip and subsequent butchering of a deer. Not that crazy. My personal favorite was a picture from a camping trip. These campers had built a wooden forest toilet. I'm an outhouse in the middle of a beautiful forest but without any walls. The picture was just this guy sitting on the toilet, presumably taking a crap, completely unaware of the photographer. He was totally at peace. It was beautiful. Worked at CVS a few years back. We still developed film. Two guys stick out to me. One was this old dude who came in once a month. He would have pictures of old lady butts out in public, like just random old lady butts in Walmart or the mall. Then he would have pictures of random houses on the same roll of film. It seemed very stalkerish. Eventually we reported it to the police, but I assume nothing came of it because he still came in once a month with the same stuff. I never saw it, but some of the employees who had been there for years said one time he had pictures developed that had cutouts of his dong glued on girls in magazines. The other time was these dudes in their mid-20s brought in some film from their vacation. It was full of pictures of weed, coke, cash, and girls with lines of coke on them. I only developed the legal pictures and told them that we didn't develop pictures of illegal activity. Gave them the negatives and suggested they buy a digital camera or use the iPhone they had in their hands. I forgot to mention the old lady butt guy would only ever buy pictures and lube, and never spoke to the cashier. It was understood that he wasn't going to take part in small talk, so we just rang him up, then bathed in hand sanitizer. Had cutouts of his dong glued on girls in magazines. Hahaha, that's freaking great. I haven't personally experienced anything weird, other than seeing about 1/3 of a dong in one pic. My lab manager has told me though that he's seen some weird crap in his day. One time he had a fairly large woman develop some photos, which included shots of her in lingerie. After the photos were developed and handed to her, the woman asks my manager, in a kind of embarrassed voice, "Did you see any of the photos?" After saying he did, she leaned in a little close and whispered, "Did you like them?" I think I remember him saying too that he once found someone trying to develop what was essentially child pee. My manager informed the customer that he had called the police. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.